Hey YouTube, Jezuzfreek with you once again. I want to talk to you guys about slavery. This is a very controversial topic. A lot of people hold up slavery within the Bible and say, look, this is the reason I refuse to follow your God, because I think that is immoral. And people think that God is wrong for allowing slavery. What I want to do is I want to talk to you guys about how people have misunderstood. What is slavery? I think all of us are familiar with the negative imageries of secular slavery. We're, all well aware of the racial and ethnic divide that was brought about because of and by slavery. We understand that slavery was a very, the epitome of exploitation of another human being for our own personal gain. But what about biblical slavery? Is or was it like the slavery that we're all familiar with? Now it's very clear that slavery in the Bible is totally different than slavery that we're familiar with. That the book of Exodus 21:26 teaches that we were to treat slaves the same standards as other Israelites. You see, we were to treat slaves biblically in a kind, loving manner. I believe that slavery was merely a foreshadowing of our relationship with our Heavenly Father. We showed the relationship between us and our Heavenly Father by the way we interacted with other human beings. You see, God is the master, we are the servant. And in our mortal lives, sometimes we are in the position of being the master to someone else. And we were to emulate our relationship with God by the way we treated those that were in a position of service to us. Now you may say, well, why should we ever be in a position of service? That right there is ugly. Why should we have slavery? Well, according to the Bible, there was 3 reasons for slavery: debt, conquering, and restitution. Let's cover debt first. The book of Deuteronomy 15:12-18 teaches that slaves were given the option of remaining slaves if they owed, and they went in slavery, restored what they owed, and if they desired to continue on because of the kind treatment from their masters, which is spoken of in Exodus 21:26, that was a viable option. And in biblical times, that was an option that was exercised quite frequently. You would have a person that was more well-to-do that would take in slaves, and they would feed and clothe and take care of, and they would be kind and loving to these slaves. And slaves would say, hey, you know what, this is better than me going out and trying to, succeed in struggling, and I'll just stay on with a slave owner and be content once their debt was restored. And finally, someone may say, well, what about conquering? You go in, you conquer a town, and now they're slaves. Oh, the brutality. Actually, as I said earlier, sin is one of the reasons of slavery. Sin and debt. You have to remember that God is sovereign, and God deemed that nations were wicked and idolatrous, and he would allow them to be conquered. Israel would march in, and they would be conquered. But what's interesting is, they were not conquered merely by the sword and forced into slavery. The leaders would actually, go to the town and say, hey, give up, surrender, and you can be our slaves. And those that understood that they were in defiance of God, that wanted to restore themselves to God's graces, or restore themselves in God's graces, they would voluntarily allow themselves to go into slavery. And those that held fast to their own iniquity and said, no, we do not acknowledge the sovereignty of God, God would have them killed. Because God did not want forced labor. Deuteronomy 20:10 speaks of this. God does not want forced labor. He wants willing submission to him. So I think when we look at biblical slavery, we see it's very clear that slavery was not barbaric and horrendous as people oftentimes will present it as. Slavery was one of restoring a debt or restoring ourselves to God's graces. And in both of those applications, both of those instances, I should say, the slaves, were to be treated as any other Israelite. They were to be treated with kindness, with love. And I think that is very, very telling of God's nature towards us. I pray God blesses you with this message. I pray that all of you will understand that slavery, when done by biblical standards, was a good thing, a positive, beneficial thing. Slavery, when done as humans decided to corrupt it and make it a exploitation, a denigration of people because of their race or their culture, ethnicity, or their financial lack thereof, whatever, however you want to say it, their financial suffering. That was wickedness, horrible wickedness, and God would frown upon that very act. That's why we need to differentiate biblical slavery from secular slavery. God bless.